don't know if it's going to come back.
No, you don't.
So I think you leave it there. But Glenn Jones, former coverage reporter for us, moving on to other things, actually moved out to Los Angeles, working with the distribution company. So good to see him back, since I don't get to see him every weekend like I used to. He's playing Black Green Devotion. That's the Jerry Thompson played at the Invitational. He said, I like this deck a lot. Couple of cosmetic changes, but he's off to a 2-0 start.
And his opponent, Phillip Martin, is a player I know quite well. He's a former, quite successful World of Warcraft trading card game player. He's in the Las Vegas area, plays with Tim Rivera, who had a Pro Tour top 8 finish recently.
Top 8 at the Invitational here in Vegas, too.
Yeah, so this is a player I know pretty well, although not a very long Magic resume, definitely a sharp card game player.
Well, we're going to watch Jund Monsters versus Green Black Devotion. Have not seen a lot of Jund Monsters. Not yet this weekend, but it's only round 3. And you know this deck is probably saturated in the room. It's a very popular deck among the players. And a good one, too.
Pretty stock list here from Phillip. The one major significant change in the main deck is there's a main deck Rakdos return. And even that's not too unorthodox at this point.
Yeah, we saw Chris Van Meter try that in Providence.
Yeah. 2 main deck copies of Mizium Mortars. Definitely Phil's best tool in the matchup here. Overloaded Mizium Mortars is pretty tough for these Devotion decks to beat.
It is not that easy to beat that if you are Devotion. Now, this Green-Black Devotion strategy, again, Jerry Thompson putting this on the map last week in the Invitational to a little bit of success. We've also seen Jacob Baugh do well with these kind of strategies as well in the Open Series when we are in the Midwest area. Your base green, splashing black, not the other way around. We're used to seeing base black, splashing green for Abrupt Decay, but this is a green deck. This is an Eidolon of Blossoms, Garrett Caller of the Beast, ramp, and overwhelm your opponent with Nykthos kind of deck.
This is... Eidolon is a big addition for this deck because it's double green, so it's great for Devotion, and it's another card that you can kind of go off with a little bit, not quite to the same extent that you can with Garruk or Nylea, for example, but with Courser you can find some extra cards, and it sort of bridges the gap in between your mana setup and your big payoffs.
Well, Jones is going to begin play here. Looks like he may have taken a mulligan, but he's got Elvish Mystic, so he's off to a really nice start here, as Martin will take a draw. Mizium Mortars is what he's found. He mentioned the importance of that card, and he found one right away.
So Phillip kept an opening hand here of some lands, Corsair Krufix, Domri, and Scavenging Ooze. These are the kind of hands that I dread when I'm playing Jund Monsters because you can't mulligan, obviously. It's lands and spells and it's fine, but the games where you're on the draw without a mana accelerant, it feels like you're hard-pressed to beat much of anything if your opponent has a real good draw.
Jones will take a draw here. This is a Temple of Malady. Top card looks like it's headed to the bottom. Going to attack in for 1. And looks like that may be it for him. So you have to imagine he's got something to do on his 4th turn of the game. Pull a Chronos. Eidolon of Blossom. Still have something to do, you have to imagine.
Now I'm curious to see if Phillip's willing to use a removal spell on this elf.
It looks like he's going to just play a Scavenging Ooze instead. So it looks like he's got bigger plans for Mizium Mortars, as Jones will take a draw. And it looks like it will be the World Eater.
And only 1 Dreadbore in Phillip's list to get out of this game 1.
Yeah, it looks like players have been moving away from Dreadbore. Brad Nelson doing so last week in the Invitational when he top 8 with Jund Monsters. So looks like that card might be on the decline, which is a good thing for Jones right now.
Sometimes you see the card replaced with Ultimate Price, but Phillip with only 2 Mizium Mortars and 1 Dreadbore as his removal suite alongside his 4 copies of Domri. So his list not really that robust game 1 against Palachronos.
And finding the appropriate removal can be a little tough sometimes. Martin going to attack here for 2. Jones not going to block, maybe a little scared of the old Gorkland Rampager. Martin going to pay 2, go up to 17. Excuse me, go down to 17. I think we're going to see a Domri, or it's actually going to be a Courser. Top card here is a Rampager. So Jones will have that information moving forward, as he will untap and take a draw here in just a moment. Looks like another Elvish Mystic was the draw.
And that Palachronos is just way too good for Glenn to risk in any sort of block.
And he's going to attack here for 5. And it looks like we're going to have a Monstrosity activation. 2 over there to lose. That's going to take that down. Palachronos is going to grow into a 7-7. And the race is on in favor of Glenn Jones.
And this is a tough spot for Jund Monsters to get out of. There's a lot of pressure on Phillip to find one of his removal spells pronto because there's not a lot of ways for him to get out of this. And he's going to die very quickly.
Hey, you mentioned that. Not a lot of Dreadbores hanging around, or Ultimate Price, anything like that to get this Palachronos off the table.
Yeah, I believe Brad played 2 last week. Phillip here on the 1 Dreadbore.
Martin taking a look at a hand of, looks like double Mizium Mortars right now. That card plays a huge role in this matchup. Probably not at its best using 2 of those to take care of Palachronos, but hey, you got to do what you got to do. You don't want to die.
I think it's well worth the cost.
Going to take 2 from the Blood Crypt and then gain 1 from the Courser, and it looks like that's 1 and that's 2. And if you're Glenn, you got to be thrilled with that.
Well, yes and no. I mean, that it's a 2 for 1, and those are 2 very good cards, but there's a really good chance in that spot that Palo just goes all the way. It's actually pretty fortunate for Phillip to be able to get out from under that.
It looks like Courser's going to come into the red zone here, so Jones is going to go down to 16. Let's see if Jones has a follow play here. That's the big question. Does draw a card for the turn. Looks like his hand, it's like, okay, there's a Garrick hanging out over there, so he's got some things to do with the mana. And he's going to just play another copy of Phillip. Let's follow this up with an Elvish Mystic. Come across for 1, put Martin down to 9. And he's rebuilt nicely here.
With Garrick left over, you know, I think a lot of people's instinct there would have been to just play the Garrick, but I think Palo is just as powerful. There's no risk of it just getting killed by a Storm Breath Dragon next turn or a Rampager. So this makes a lot more sense.
And you could certainly make, I think, a reason to just play Garrick, get your cards when you plus it, knowing that it's going to die to Courser plus Rampager. But I like this setup a lot better here for Jones.
You know Phillip doesn't have anything like Dreadbore or Ultimate Price in his hand. He would have just done that to your Palo instead of using the 2 Mizium Mortars. So there's a really good chance he just doesn't have much in a way of anything to handle this card.
There's an attack for 2 from the Courser yet again. And this is something carried to ×2. So Jones is going to untap. Last card in the hand is a Garrick, as you did mention. Looks like he may have picked up a land for his draw step, but he's going to start tapping some mana for the Caller of Beasts. And this elevator is going to be going up in just a moment here. You see Martin taking a look. We'll do the exact same. See exactly what Garrick Caller of Beasts does do. The +1, I think, Patrick, is the most important part here.
Looking at some creatures. Look at the top 5 and get your homies.
Take them all with you. You don't see the minus all that often with Garrick, putting a green creature into play. When your hand is pretty saturated with cards, that's when that will happen. And the ultimate, oddly enough, I have never seen the ultimate get used before.
I think we saw it at the Invitational.
I think Jerry may have done it, but I wasn't on then. I wasn't on then, so I've never actually seen the Garrick emblem. Begs the question, do we have a Garrick emblem with us?
Yeah, I guess we have prepared in light of Jerry's going ultimate. Now we do have the emblem.
Jerry always causing trouble one way or another. So Garrick found just a couple of cards, nothing too important in the cards that it found. See, another temple here for Jones is going to come in, but it does demand an answer.
Yeah,
and that's the most important part.
And unfortunately, Phillip, so does his Palo.
Jones maybe going to hang back on defense here. Knows the opponent does have a copy of Gorkline Rampager in the grip.
So Glenn cannot keep his Garrick alive even if he blocks with the elf. If he's interested in saving it, he has to commit Palo. I think I would just attack.
Just take down one of those walls?
I think so. I guess there's some risk in that world where Phillip does draw a Dreadbore and Ultimate Price. He might just be out of action.
Well, Glenn's strategy here looks to be pretty obvious, which is once that Courser does come in, he'll be blocking with the Hydra. And he's going to lose to Rampager, yes, but it sounds like he's okay with that exchange because it looks like he feels as though Garrick is much more important than Pulukranos in this game.
Garrick's likely to find him some other high-impact card.
You have to imagine that's the case. Yeah. But this is just very telling. It's pretty transparent about how he values the cards that are in play.
Yeah, it's just, you know, Phillip's shown no ability to stop this Palo, and it's quickly entering the abyss. And so I would probably just be inclined to try to just ride that.
Jones going to take a look here. Oh, yeah, he will still block, knowing that this will die to a Gorkline Rampager. Oh, and he's already ready to say, all right, this is in the graveyard. And my Garrick's going to go down a little bit. So again, this is an exchange that he knew about and one that he was happy to make. And he's already took the Garrick down to 4. Trample damage, of course, becomes a 6-power creature. -5 from Pulukranos, puts it down to 1. 1 damage does come across. The follow-up now is going to be a Domri.
So Glenn's sequence in all this is much riskier in the event that Phillip has another Rampager. Then he loses Garrick and Palo. But the upside is, in the world where he's only playing against 1, he gets to keep his Garrick, and that's a pretty good hedge against a removal spell coming off the top here for Phillip.
5 cards to look at here if you're Jones. Looking for some creatures. You see a Courser, 2 copies of Voyaging Satyr. So he's going to add those to his hand. No Nykthos yet. He's got everything else, though.
And mana is not really bottlenecking him that much right now. He'll be able to cast basically everything.
And he's got 5 cards in his hand. I think he can put probably all 5 into play at this point. He just needs a way to finish pushing through those last points of damage. Going to start with a Burning Tree Emissary. That'll resolve. Trigger's going to go on. A red and a green mana here for Jones. See him slide over those Elvish Mystics. And this is a Courser. So top card here is another copy of Garruk. Doesn't really need one of those right now, though. Can continue to unload the hand if you'd like. See Glenn saying, I don't need another one of those right now. I'm looking for something better than that.
And Glenn and Phillip go way back because of WoW TCG, so these guys know each other pretty well.
Not too surprising, yeah. Glenn played a lot of WoW TCG when that was a card game.
So how much right now does Glenn respect the possibility of a third Mizium Mortars in Phillip's list?
I think the question is, can I even beat one if he has a third one? I think the answer to that is no.
Probably not.
So I think you're in the situation right now where, again, we know he only has 2 and he's used them both. But if you're Jones, I think you're just thinking, well, you know, if he has another one, he has another one. I can't do anything about it. And that's just kind of life, if that's the case. So Jones deploys a few more mana accelerants there in Voyaging Satyrs, and now it looks like Elvish Mystics are going to go towards Domri. Looks like one of those may get blocked. And he might be going towards Domri or just towards the life total. Yeah, he's going to go towards Domri. So that'll tick down to 3. Looks like he wants to contain that Planeswalker a little bit and simply pass the turn back over to Martin, who's going to roll up the sleeves and draw a copy. Pulakranos. We'll see the top card here is a Scavenging Ooze.
These are some pretty big threats. I mean, Glenn's going to be able to find chump blockers for a really long time as long as Garruk stays in play. But if something happens, then things get much more complicated.
Yeah, Martin might have interest now in just playing Stormbright Dragon and attacking Jones, not caring about Garruk. There's another Garruk on top of the deck. The first attack from Stormbright Dragon is not going to get the job done. So Stormbright Dragon may be reserved for just going upstairs.
Yeah, the ship may have sailed, and keep in mind, you know, Glenn pluses the Garruk. He'll likely be able to deploy everything he draws, but in the event that he can't, then the monsters from Stormbright Dragon next turn could potentially represent lethal. Unlikely, but not out of the question.
And I think that the thing that Glenn's looking for here is the combination of maybe Nylea God of the Hunt plus Nykthos within those next couple of cards. You know, that would be able to attack for a boatload of damage. Martin now, though, with a real decision to make on how he wants to kind of sequence the next couple of turns of this game.
It's unclear if he can do anything but race.
Yeah, it seems like a racing situation to me.
Yeah.
We'll see what Martin does figure out. Jones sitting at a pretty healthy 14 right now. And the race may have to be on. And now you see the counting begin. How much devotion do you have? How much damage can you deal?
Well, Phillip also has to be concerned about just getting attacked also. I mean, he's at 9. Glenn rather does have a board full of creatures. They don't attack for very much, but it's not inconceivable for him to generate lethal over the course of 2 turns.
Martin with some real decisions. Got some real powerful cards there at his disposal. The big question is, how do you sequence here? And he is really deciding. As now he's finally reaching for some mana. And you see 4 mana being tapped. Will he add a 5th? The answer is no, so it looks like maybe not Stormbright Dragon time. It will be his own version of Pulakranos. Perhaps we'll see a fight with Domri. It looks like we will. So, Courser's going to bite the dust there for Jones. Curiatid's going to add a little bit of mana for an Elvish Mystic. And that's it.
Just trying to keep...
Not a bad turn.
Trying to keep the board relatively stable.
Elevator going up on the Caller of East. It's time to take a look at the top 5. There's a Nykthos among them. You see an Nylon of Blossoms. Now that's what Jones is looking for. Nykthos is going to go to the bottom, which is unfortunate for him, but the cards that are going to the grip matter quite a bit. There's a Sylvan Caryatid, Nylon of Blossoms, a copy of Pulakranos, and a Nylea God of the Hunt. Now all Jones needs, I think, now is just a Nykthos to tie the room together and generate a boatload of mana.
He may be able to win the game from this point without his copy of Nykthos.
Yeah.
That would make it easier, of course, but...
So here's 3 mana from the Mystics. Let's make it 4. Maybe it's time to start with Eidolon of Blossoms. Of course, how he wants to sequence these cards is a little bit interesting. But I think you want to start with Eidolon. He has not played a land yet this turn. Of course, he wants to start here because, well, it's party time now.
Yeah.
He found a copy of Nykthos. Now he gets to have a real ball.
I believe what you were about to say is he wants to give himself as many shots at Nykthos as possible.
Pretty much, yeah, with Courser and Nylea. But because he was able to find a copy of Nykthos and he has multiple Voyaging Satyr plays, he's going to go from 0 to 60 here in just a moment.
Yeah, this is going to be a huge turn.
Now, Eidolon, of course, cantrips for itself. Top card here will be a Burning Tree Emissary, but we've got a big turn now. There's a Nykthos that he found off the Eidolon trigger. So he's going to drain a whole bunch of mana. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 green.
I mean, it's not like Phillip may die this turn.
I believe he is dying this turn. He got 9 mana now left, and the reason he's going to die, of course, is because Voyaging Satyr. Now he's going to draw 2 cards, and we add in Burning Tree Emissary generating free mana, and Voyaging Satyr being able to untap Nykthos with 2 of those in play. The world right now is Glenn Jones's oyster.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got 9 green mana floating. He's going to put a Burning Tree Emissary into play. That'll leave him with 9, so it's a wash. And no cantripping because it's not an enchantment. You're going to untap here. Go down to 7, up a bunch.
$20-something is what I'm counting.
Yeah, at this point, counting may be irrelevant.
Yeah.
Glenn can cast all the cards in his hand and do whatever he'd like. So now it just depends on how does he want to sequence all these spells. And this is where this deck looks impressive.
Yeah. Once you have Nykthos plus a board, especially with Garrick, you start doing just totally insane things. Things that no other deck in the format can keep up with.
Going to play another copy of Pulachronos, Will Jones. Voyaging Satyr is going to do some untapping here. Of course, now Pulachronos is a beautiful mana sink for the fight ability to be able to tear a lot of things apart if you'd like. So he's going to count exactly how much devotion he has yet again, make sure everything is kosher here. But this is exactly when Green-Black Devotion looks like a very difficult deck to beat. Part of the reason that Thompson played this deck last weekend is because he felt that this strategy was quite powerful and how good it is against Mono-Black Devotion and those variants. One spot where this deck is quite weak is against Revelation decks.
It's not the best matchup. You're, of course, susceptible to Supreme Verdict, and you only have so many cards that really matter, that really give you any substance. And so counter spells can be very powerful against you as well.
So you're going to see a big fight. Got to clear the path. Going to drop down a few more dummies here. Will Jones. Looks like multiple dice necessary. Don't see this. It's a Geez-O Pete's. You don't see that a lot. Follow this up here. Going to trigger, of course, the 2 Eidolon of Blossoms to draw 2 more cards because Nylea. I think Jones says, that's my turn.
What's your turn? Storm Breath Dragon. That's pretty good.
Phillip Martin going to draw a card here, and he's going to pick up the other one. Glenn Jones is going to win game number 1 over Phillip Martin. Green-Black Devotion wins game number 1 over Jund Monsters.
Not surprising there. Phillip, without much pressure, had to spend too many resources killing a Pulachronos, and Glenn's Garrick really just carried the day there.
Well, it is time to look at the sideboards. You have Phillip Martin in front of you. What's he got?
2 Golgari Charm, a Thoughtseize, a Dreadbore, a Chandra, a Pyromancer, 2 Abrupt Decay, a Doomblade, a Vraska, a Mizzium Mortars, a Rattus Return, 4 Mizkar Hydras. I just think anything that looks like a removal spell has to come in.
I think I agree with you.
And the Thoughtseize account, I think even Chandra is fine in this matchup. He just needs to keep Glenn's board contained, keep him off of 6 mana, keep him off of doing anything impressive with Nykthos.
Take a look here at Jones's sideboard. Narber Colossus, 2 copies of Setessan Tactics, 2 Farika, God of Affliction, 2 Scavenging Ooze, 4 Golgari Charm, and 4 Nylea's Disciple. not anything really exciting going on here in my opinion. I do like Arbor Colossus just because it will be the biggest creature on the battlefield a high percentage of the time. So that's one reason to like that card. So Testing Tactics can be okay. Freaking God of Affliction can be okay as well as an engine after things do die. But there isn't anything that really stands out to me that says, this is a card that I have for this matchup. But that's part of what makes Jund Monsters an appealing deck is there isn't a go-to card to beat it.
Yeah, it's really hard to think of like what's the card that beats Jund Monsters. That really doesn't mean anything. Yeah. I mean, Doomblades and Ultimate Prices are very good, but there's not any single card that they fold to. Much more robust. Even blue-white controller, for example, that's a deck you associate with having a lot of easy answers to a number of different cards. But Mistcutter Hydra is a unique problem for that deck. There's no real analog for Jund Monsters in that regard.
Well, both players are going to finish sideboarding up here, so we'll be underway for game number 2 in just a moment. But if you are just joining us, Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan, Star City Games Open Series here in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's round 3 of 10 of our Standard Open at SCG Live. Hashtag SCGVEGAS for your tweets all weekend long. It's been a pretty fun start. I think the biggest, this tournament, of course, important for a lot of people, but probably most important for Joe Lissette.
This is his weekend to make a push. This counts for a lot. He's got, time to catch up here, but the tournaments that he's going to be able to attend may be few and far between. And if he can do some work this weekend and in Portland next weekend, he can really make a push to get the Season 3 invite. He's
in 3rd place right now. Van Meter, Ross, and Bronduin have already punched their tickets, but Lissette is actually chasing Bertoncini right now. And then you've got Ketter, Rill, and Merriam, players who feel like they're a little further behind, but all it takes is one win, and we know that each of those players is capable of winning one of these things.
Yeah, Ken Ketter, Eric Rill, and Ross have all had very strong tournament runs through 2014 thus far, and it's just going to be an issue of how many events do they show up to.
Yeah, that's the big question. Of course, we're on the West Coast right now. We're here in Las Vegas this weekend. We're in Portland the next weekend, but then we head back to the East Coast, Worcester the weekend after that.
Yeah, Worcester, Baltimore. We start seeing Kansas City. Dallas is on the schedule, so it starts mixing up a little bit.
And, of course, it's always fun to see if the players are going to travel, chase those points. We saw Lissette do that. We saw Rill do it as well. Who will travel to these things? And, again, Season 3 feels a little bit shorter than Season 1 and Season 2. So those points now, the kind of the crunch to get these points, it's not a large window at all.
Yeah, it's really magnified how important those tournaments are.
And it's going to sound crazy, but you and me are going to be at the Invitational in Somerset before you know it.
Yeah, I know.
But that's home for you, so you're probably going to be pretty happy about that.
I am. I'm looking forward to it.
And actually, this time I'll actually be able to join you in Somerset. I wasn't able to go with you a little while ago. You were there with
Matthias for the Open.
Yeah, for the Open, and then the first Open got canceled.
Right.
Because of the snowstorm. But we are past that point in time, so I'll actually maybe be able to meet the Sullivan family.
Perhaps.
Perhaps you can arrange that.
Well, we will see.
You promised me a fine Italian meal.
There's so many to choose from in Central New Jersey. It's insane.
That is my favorite food, after all. So
yeah.
I know you won't let me down.
No, there's a lot of great options.
If you could eat at one place in Jersey right now, last meal, you're in Jersey, where would it be? You got to choose one.
Triumph Brewery in Princeton.
Triumph Brewery.
In Princeton, yeah.
Good food? Good beer?
Yeah, good.
Or just kind of the atmosphere?
Everything.
Okay.
It's like they make their own beer. It's great. The food's excellent. It's right across the street from Princeton University, so you can walk out and wander around campus after you're done. Downtown, calling Princeton downtown Princeton is a little disingenuous. It's just it's the main street, but that would be my spot.
I've never been to Princeton.
It's great. If I wasn't living in San Diego, I believe that would be where I would go.
I was very fond of Providence when we were there.
Yeah, all the small, college-centric New England and Mid-Atlantic towns kind of have a charm all to their own.
Yeah, it had a nice small-time feel to it.
Yeah.
But like a nice one, not like some, kind of garbagey college town. I was like, oh, this place is pretty cool. You're a couple hours away from Boston and New York and, other places if you want to get to big cities, but this is kind of a city all its own. Yeah, there's a small town feel of people have lived here for generations, and it's kind of quaint, there's a good local business atmosphere. And then there's small town, like it's 7 o'clock on a Sunday and we can't get food anymore because everything is closed. Everything's closed,
small town, those towns are very much in the first camp. I'm not a big fan of the second camp.
Both players going to take a look at the openers here. Phillip Martin will be on the play for game number 2, losing to Nykthos and friends game number 1. And Jones is going to take a mulligan, something that this deck seems to do a pretty decent amount.
Yeah, you get hands that go nowhere. Either all expensive stuff or all cheap stuff. So mulligan's more than the usual deck.
It's actually kind of funny. We've seen strategies like this before, just a lot of mana acceleration into one or two big threats. Of course, Primeval Titan and Valakut is the one that I think of quite a bit, and you're kind of at the mercy of your own draws. But many moons ago, there was a version of this deck called Elfindale, where it had Skull Clamp, to make sure that these bad draws wouldn't happen.
My good friend Craig Krempels, in fact, won U.S. Nationals.
I do recall.
The last tournament where that card was legal.
See, that's a different kind of ramp deck, because that's the kind of ramp deck that shouldn't be legal.
Right.
A ramp deck that can draw cards.
You would ask, why is Skull Clamp in your ramp deck? It kills your mana creatures and it costs mana to use, but then you play some games, you figure it out.
Did anyone in particular come up with that deck? It felt like it kind of came out of nowhere.
I don't know. It was one of those things where I played against it, I think, 4 times in 8 rounds, so everyone had it. I'm not exactly sure where the original idea came from, but Skull Clamp in one toughest creatures was not a challenging combo to figure out. Many people did it.
Jones with a little mana acceleration here. 2 copies of Elvish Mystic and a Sylvan Caryatid, so he's looking to wrap into a big spell. No Skull Clamp here, thankfully.
Thankfully. It would be hard for Phillip to beat this game, I believe.
An Overgrown Tomb here. We'll follow this up with a Sylvan Caryatid number 2. So Jones will take a draw. Well, he's got 5 mana. He's got 2 Garrets. Looks like he did not draw the 6th mana here, but he looks like he has something to do in the meantime. Looks to be an Eidolon Blossom, so a little can tripping. Take a draw, Will Jones. So he picked up a copy of Setessan Tactics before passing the turn back over to Martin. What's the bigger egregious error? 4 Skull Clamps being legal set or 4 Yawgmoth's Will?
4 Skull Clamps for sure.
Okay.
Because at least when Yawgmoth's Will is legal, someone just dies.
Sure.
If a card's going to be powerful, at least let's let it end the game and go play another one. Yawgmoth's Will is also a little easier to hate, I think, with like Graveyard Hate and so forth.
Skull Clamp could not be overcome.
I think Skull Clamp.
Stormbreath Dragon.
Also, Yawgmoth's Will is a black card. There's at least an opportunity cost. You have to put swamps in your deck.
Sure.
Skull Clamp, not the case there.
Do whatever you want.
Just do whatever you want.
Mana being tapped here by Jones. Let's see what he wants to add to the table here. Maybe a Courser? It'll be a Pharika. So a little cantripping. You see Martin going to take a look at the God of Affliction. We will, of course, do the same. This card's actually starting to pick up and play a little bit here.
It's really powerful in any sort of any creature and removal spell matchup that isn't blisteringly fast. This card's very good. The tokens you make on the ground have Death Touch, so those are just, an excellent way to clog up the ground. It synergizes with Eidolon very nicely because it's an enchantment that it generates, so a lot to like here.
And for Jones's deck, he's actually quite good at turning it on. It's on right now, in fact. The Devotion has been met of 7. And as you mentioned, the fact that it makes enchantment creatures with Eidolon is a pretty big deal. I wouldn't be surprised, maybe not this particular standard format, but the next one, this could be a really big deal here.
For sure. And you're seeing, Eidolon just doing a lot of good work for this deck. It's something that he can ramp into where if he gets hit with a Mizium Mortars, it's not the end of the world because at least he's drawn a card. Synergizes with other pieces of the deck, the Pharikas and the Coursers. Just does a lot of things well. Doesn't overwhelm you, rarely does, but does enough little stuff the right way.
Jones looks like he's going to come in here for 3 points of damage after playing a Forest. And it looks like what he may be setting up is a Setessan Tactics in combination with Pharika or maybe some Snakes. Could be a really nice turn there for Jones as Martin draws a card. Looks like there's a Mizium Mortars hanging out, but I don't know if he has the 6th mana.
He is missing both the 6 mana and the 3rd red source of mana. So
yeah.
he has very few draws right now that turn it on.
See Martin taking a look at Pharika. Curious to see if the Devotion is on. It certainly is. 2, of course, from Pharika itself, 2 from Eidolon of Blossoms, and 1 from each and Mana Accelerant. You see the count there for Martin. It is certainly on. It can attack for a lot.
And you can see, the green Devotion lists, when they're up and running, they aren't playing normal Magic anymore.
Not at all.
And a lot of decks in Standard, Jund Monsters, even though it does powerful stuff, has a lot of very good individual cards, it's always playing normal Magic. Once you get out in front of what that deck does, it's hard for them to catch up unless Mizium Mortars randomly blows someone out.
Of course, you're going to reveal a top card. That's a Stomping Ground, so that's the mana that Martin was looking for. That's going to come into play tap. Martin will gain a life. We'll see the top card of his deck again is now a Gorkland Rampager, but he was secretly looking for that mana. And if you're Jones, you have to be wary of Mizium Mortars anyway, given your deck.
And I think this card's been on Glenn's radar the entire game. Now he knows it's a possibility. Next turn, he's going to play as well as he can to take the sting out of it, but only so much you can really do from this spot.
Jones, we know he's got a land. We know there's a Garrick hiding over there. There's also a Tactics. Let's see what big spell he wants to play on this turn. So Test and Tactics, a card to me feels like pretty underplayed at this point, but I imagine during its lifespan, it'll have a huge effect on Standard as well.
It's tough because it requires so many creatures in play for you to live the dream. And it also kind of assumes your opponent is also putting a lot of stuff into play. So it's not always the easiest card to incorporate into decks, but in the matchups where it's good, it is great.
You see Glenn Jones in the tank right now, trying to figure out exactly what he needs to do. Have to imagine he is thinking about Mizzing Mortars at this point. He's going to go reaching for some mana. You got to imagine he wants to get that Stormbreath Dragon off the table as well. But can he rebuild post-Mortars? I think he might be thinking, can I even beat that card?
Can he rebuild? And can he rebuild in time?
Yeah.
Because he's going to be getting hit for a lot of damage.
He's going to add another creature to the board. It's a Voyaging Satyr. Well, let's see what the follow-up is going to be here in just a moment. So I think we're going to see one. Mana being tapped here by Jones. Currently up a game, looking to close this one out, but it looks like Martin putting up more resistance than last time.
On the play with a mana accelerant. It's much different for this deck than being on the draw without.
Yeah, that's where Jund Monsters is at its best. Jones maybe looking to attack here with the Eidolon Blossoms. Maybe trying to trap Martin into a bad spot. Maybe a bad block, we'll see.
And if Glenn is playing a Voyaging Satyr before combat, that to me is something of a white flag in terms of him trying to beat Mizzing Mortars this game. He may be saying, I just can't beat this.
Yeah. Looks like Eidolon's going to bite the dust here. See exactly what the block is going to be. If there will be one. And yeah, this seems like it's almost too good to pass up. So now we go reaching for mana. Got some mana being tapped. It looks like it's time for Strive, something that we don't get to say very often on Test and Tactics.
Yeah, this card is really sweet when you get to board states like this, where there's a half dozen creatures on each side of the table. Then some real crazy stuff can start happening.
Yeah, of course, there's a gigantic blowout when Nykthos is involved and all that's good stuff. But +1/+1, you see the Strive, and of course this creature fights another target creature, and Farika's going to get to do battle against the Stormbreath Dragon, clear that off the table. We'll get some fighting action going on here. So finish this off. Eidolon Blossoms is going to have 3 toughness. So a good turn there for Jones, all things considered. However, unfortunately for him, he's going to lose a whole bunch of his board in a minute.
Wasn't a shabby turn, but this is the follow-up that Glenn may not be able to beat.
The good thing for him is there's not a dragon on the table.
Yeah.
So he's going to attempt to rebuild now.
If Glenn finds a black source of mana, then he can really start going to work with Farika. Start rebuilding that way at least, but it appears he is without.
And all he could do is draw and pass the turn back over to Martin. Martin going to reach for some mana right now. I think there might be a backup Stormbreath Dragon in the hand, and that's exactly what there is. There's also a Vraska hanging out as well. Vraska may seem a little expensive in this matchup, but I'm with you. You just want to have as much removal as you can.
Yep. He can't let Glenn Garrick twice.
Yeah.
He may be able to beat it once, not the second time.
Jones with an Eidolon Blossoms. This is an attempt to rebuild. Draws a card, simply passes the turn back. Going to show you Gore-Clan Rampager. We'll go on to game number 3 here between Phillip Martin and Glenn Jones. Jund Monsters able to tie it up.
You can see why Palakrandos is so important for Glenn in this matchup too. Phillip, without a lot of removal and putting a 5/5 into play is a great way to develop your board when you're worried about Mizzing Mortars getting overloaded on you.
And you see just how potent Mortars can be in this matchup. Yeah. Of course, 2 in the main deck. No, I don't think any additional
one in the board.
One additional one in the sideboard. So likelihood of him drawing that in combination with Temples, and the card filtering this deck actually has pretty high.
Yeah, it's not unreasonable. I mean, in a 3-game match, Glenn losing one of the games to an overloaded Mizzing Mortars feels about the right amount that should be happening.
Yeah, shouldn't come as much of a surprise.
Right.
Well, while these 2 players go back to the drawing boards, and do shuffle up and get ready for game number 3 of what looks to be a pretty entertaining match. We do have Star City Games game night to talk about coming in September at participating stores, which can certainly be you.
Yeah, Wednesday night organized play here. As you see on the screen, 2 pins and 8 foils per week. We're going to be switching it up month to month starting in September. We wanted to get a little more grassroots organized play, a little bit more casual friendly. Stores can run these whatever format they want, either sanctioned or non-sanctioned. Store owners, tournament organizers, you manage asking for these prize kits the exact same way you manage all your other IQ requests and so forth on the Star City Games website. And players, if you're interested in bringing these programs, just contact your store owner or TO as appropriate.
I know if I was still a young grinder, feels like, I can't believe I'm going to say this 10 years ago, I'd be bugging my store owner at Ground Zero Comics in Strongsville, Ohio to get these bad boys.
10 years, you're a pup still.
No, that's old, man.
10 years is basically nothing.
Just because you're older doesn't mean that I'm not old.
Well, it's just all relative, right? I mean, that's what the old and young, those are just relative words. They don't really mean anything intrinsically.
I suppose that's true. Is that how you make yourself feel young? Is that you tell yourself that those words don't mean anything?
I hang out with older people.
Oh, so by definition, you're young.
Yeah.
Because you hang out with
relative
older
to
people.
my peer group, yes.
Fair enough. That's smart.
Easy.
That's very smart. Star City Games game night coming in September for you guys. If you guys want that, of course, game night at StarCityGames.com is where you can send the emails, StarCityGames.com/game night on the website, and bug your local tournament organizer. It's not hard to get.
You can accomplish the same thing by hanging out with the less attractive, for example. Like, do you want to be, are you good looking or not? Well, that's sort of relative, right, to your peer group. Again.
Oh, Mean Girl style.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect.
It's like Mean Girls, basically.
Yeah. And anytime that we can talk about Mean Girls while we're live is A-okay with me.
An iconic piece of American cinema.
You know, no argument here.
Yeah, that
you
movie
are just dead on.
Excellent.
Tier 1,
yeah.
as we like to say in the Magic community.
Simpler, more promising times for Lindsay Lohan, perhaps, but the movie has still held up well.
Are you trying to say that maybe perhaps this city got the better of her?
I don't want to, I don't know the details too well. But.
Game 3 underway here shortly between Phillip Martin and Glenn Jones. Judd Monsters versus Green Black Devotion. Jones will be on the play. He's mulliganed both games so far. So I'm interested to see exactly what happens when his deck keeps 7.
Sure, although this doesn't feel like the kind of like a raw card count sort of matchup. It feels like Glenn's able to do his thing, or Phillip's able to stop him from doing his thing. And it doesn't really matter too much about who mulliganed or drew an extra card here and there off an Eidolon or a Corsair. It's about a race to overloaded mortars more than anything else.
And Glenn trying to put a board out there that can beat that, or at least not get destroyed by it very badly.
It's very hard to do it unless he has Palachronos. Then he has a shot.
Yep.
Gives him a really powerful 5/5.
We'll be underway in just a bit. It's been fun to watch so far. We've seen some name players do battle. We saw Joe Lissette in the first round, blue-white control. He won his first match. We also saw Osa Blevadovich get devastated by a white-blue aggro deck. He did not look too thrilled to be playing Boss Sly.
I was amused watching him in action.
That wasn't so bad.
Because he was so casting a Founder Street Denizen, not really Osa's speed.
And then, of course, Greg Hatch with mono black aggro was able to win his second round as Jones is going to take another mulligan here. Martin looking at a pretty good hand. You got Stomp Ground on Blood Crypt, looks like a couple of removal spells. Not sure if there's an accelerant hanging out, but he's got the necessary mana to operate.
Very solid hand. Keep in mind that Glenn can't really remove creatures except for tactics. So even something like Scavenging Ooze can grow large enough to be a lethal threat on it all its own.
Yeah, Pulacrano certainly does require quite the large investment to get some creatures off the board, even though we did see that in the first game, a very large one thanks to a Nykthos.
Yeah.
So it's not impossible, but it is difficult to set up. Joe's going to take a look at 6 cards. He's been taking quite a few mulligans. He's got 1 land over there. Looks like he's got 2. Can't toss that one back. Just going to play a force and pass the turn. Martin going to take a draw. You saw Jones does have a copy of Golgari Charm in his hand. You have to imagine that's to be able to beat Mizium Mortar's Overload, regenerating the squad. And there's Sylvan Carry added before passing the turn back over to Martin, who draws a copy of Pulacranos.
So now that Glenn has black mana and a Golgari Charm, he has a lot of wiggle room to play around Mizium Mortars this game. Now there's other stuff that Phillip brings to the table that's very threatening for him. And, Glenn is mulliganed, so it's compounded even further that he has this Golgari Charm in his hand instead of something proactive. But he's got a good hand to play against the card that beat him last game.
Joe's going to play an Overgrown Tomb tapped and just simply pass the turn. This is Scavenging Ooze. Martin having a little bit of mana problems. Jones will take a draw here, and he can really take advantage of the situation depending on what he runs into. Looks like he has a Nykthos, so that's not so bad. He might have an Arbor Colossus as well, and he is going to deploy the 6/6. Now you see Martin kind of shrug his shoulders, doesn't care too much. The reason for that is, of course, I think he has a Dreadbore in his hand.
Got a lot of removal for that one.
Arbor Colossus certainly has the ability to win a game all on its own, and these green mirrors, oftentimes it is the biggest creature on the table.
Yeah, it's really impressive, and you know, once you're able to cast it, of course, going monsters is pretty easy, holds off Storm Breath Dragon, but you do get spots like this where it's pretty easy for the Jund Monsters player to just swat it aside.
That's exactly what a Doomblade is going to do. So bye-bye Arbor Colossus, in comes Scavenging Ooze, a little bit of fuel down there in the Arbor Colossus if Ooze would like to grow. Well, let's see if Jones has something like a Garrick here. That's the card that can really pull him ahead if he's able to find it.
I mean, he needs something high impact here while Phillip is missing land drops. The fact that he's played a Temple here, he's starting to dig himself out of it. If Glenn is just messing around with mana creatures and burning emissaries, that's not going to be enough to beat any sort of hand that Phillip has.
The problem here, of course, is that he has such a high density of those cards that the likelihood of him having something like that is actually relatively high.
Yes.
Martin will take a draw. You saw Jones just play a Burning Emissary and simply pass the turn back. So no Garrick, no Eidolon of Blossoms, no Courser of Crewfix. Nothing to really get the ball rolling just yet for the Green-Black Devotion player. Martin looking at a Temple of Malice as his draw.
And Glenn's hand is just it's pure reaction right now.
Temple of Malice, top card, gonna stay on top. In comes the Scavenging Ooze. See if Jones maybe tries to block here. It's a little bit risque. And it looks like maybe a double block here from Jones. Interesting. Making his move.
Yeah, I'm sure Phillip is just going to go ahead, eat, and see what Glenn is up to.
Yep. He says, I'm going to put you first, you second. And is Jones prepared to kind of get ruined by a Gorkline Rampager here? So there's an eat. I think we're going to have a response to the eat. And it's time to strive on this Test and Tactics. We think. That's what's going to happen. So you're going to see a strive to Test and Tactics right now. It's going to give each of these creatures +1/+1, the ability to fight. Of course, Burning Emissary is the only one that's going to get the opportunity to do battle.
Yeah.
However, our good friend Gorkline Rampager is going to make this one look not so good. Ooze is going to become a 6/6 now, and then the removal of Arbor Colossus will resolve. It's going to become a 7/7, and you check the power and toughness on those two creatures. Caryatid moved up into a 4. Burning Emissary moved into a 3. That's going to be a losing fight. Jones won't take any trample damage, but more creatures in the graveyard here for Scavenging Ooze. Not the best of turns there.
I'm surprised Glenn got that aggressive trying to answer the Ooze there when there's no more creatures left in the graveyard past the Arbor Colossus that got removed. And by playing it that way, you open up the Ooze to be lethal on its own. I mean, now there's a Gorkline Rampager, multiple creatures in Glenn's graveyard. Given that his life total was pretty high at the moment, this felt like a needless risk.
Yeah, I don't love it. I don't love it on that turn. I think that you can pick a better spot as there's a Pharika than the one that Jones did opt to take. He's going to activate Pharika right away so you can get a 1/1 snake here with Death Touch. But I'm in agreement with you. I don't love the time that he chose to make that line of play. I think he could have picked a better spot, maybe induced a better trap. You see Martin draw another copy of Gorkline Rampager here. So it's time to go fighting. And if you're Jones, you gotta be happy with that exchange. Your Death Touch creature takes down the Pool of Chronos. You see Jones celebrating a little bit. Perhaps Martin didn't know that the snake had Death Touch.
Yeah, I think that probably caught him by surprise there.
What about sloppy tapping here too?
Yeah.
You may notice. So we'll see if Jones is able to get back in the game after a bit of a fumble here. Gonna remove a creature. Make another Death Toucher. And all you can do is pass the turn back over to Martin, who will take a draw right now. It's a Temple of Abandon. You can see Martin's hand. It's a pretty good one. There's some Mortars over there, Storm Breath Dragon. But of course, when your opponent's not drawing any lands, that means they're drawing spells.
Yes. Can only be one or the other.
Yep.
And now is Phillip going to do things like use removal spells on these snakes?
Well, you can see the power of these. Pretty good card in Pharika.
And Phillip is just kind of swamped with removal spells here. Wouldn't surprise me to see him use a Dreadport in this spot.
I wouldn't be surprised to see Jones regenerate his creature either.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time to regenerate. I know he has a Test and Tactics in his hand as well, but he's just going to regenerate his snake Going to remove a couple creatures. Will Martin to make Ooze a little bit bigger, gain a little bit more life. It's going to become a 5/5 at this point. Looks like it's time to come on into the red zone. Going to play a Temple of Abana, a little scry action here. You got to really like tactics in combination with Death Touch creatures.
It's a sweet combo.
Jones goes down to 7. Let's see what he draws for the turn. Looks like a copy of Phillip. And this is a Voyaging Satyr. So he's working his way towards something here, slowly but surely. Going to pass the turn back over Will Jones to Martin. Martin draws a Forest for the turn. Does have the necessary green mana to overload Elysium Mortars. Looks like we're going to have a Dreadbore here.
It's going to be another really good tactics.
Yeah, it's going to be a tactics here. Both these creatures. So we'll each get +1/+1, the ability to fight. Of course, Voyaging Satyr is a little sick. Death Touch is going to take down this, so some pretty good exchanges here for Jones. He's keeping his head above water.
Yeah, for not really getting to any of his payoff cards here, he is doing a surprising job of keeping himself in the game here.
Phillip is going to come down here for Martin. Jones going to untap, take a draw here. Not sure he found anything that he was looking for, but he will tap 4 mana. It's time to deploy and pull a Chronos of his own. His other card there is a Pharika, so he drew a second copy of that. As good as that card is, secondary copies are not very good.
No.
Scavenging Ooze the draw here for Martin, but Martin, again, with a lot of really good cards in his hand. He adds the Ooze, has a Rampager, Stormbreath Dragon, the ability to overload Elysium Mortars, and of course the ability to use Polakranos if you'd like.
He's just wary about all the tricks that Glenn has shown at this point. I mean, Glenn's blown him out several turns in a row by doing different stuff, so I'm sure even if the play seems obvious to Phillip, he's going to be giving himself a pause here to think about things. If he fights with Palakranos right now, it gives Glenn the ability to make a token with Pharika. So if he wants to trade straight up, that's fine. Or if he needs to do this before combat, which is also good. So he can't make a token.
Yep. There's a Rampager here, and I think that is going to do it, and it will. So Phillip Martin with a Rampager is going to defeat Glenn Jones 2-1. Jund Monsters taking down Green-Black Devotion.
Seems like